While Spa and Watkins Glen share fast sweeping turns and long straights, they don't share the same amount of runoff. Better keep it inside the boundaries as we get ready for the PCA Sim Racing Series 14 Club Class. And you'll see it all live here on RaceSpotTV. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth tonight is Ron Mons. Behind the scenes is our director, Hugo Luis. We're thrilled to have Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships, sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. All right, so we've knocked out our runs at Circuit des Spa-Francorchamps, but now we rock up, Ron, to Watkins Glen.
Yeah, and rocking up to a new version of Watkins Glen as well. One of the many facilities that got that brand new NASCAR refresh in the swap over into Season 4. So we got to break in this track. There haven't been too many changes, but it is a change nonetheless in these racers after the challenging run that they had 1 week ago at Spa. I say 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago at Spa. It is going to be a very tough ask for these racers to keep this season rolling, heading off to another challenging racetrack. We're expecting some good old-fashioned racing, but it's going to be the classic Watkins Glen fun that we usually expect.
Without a doubt, and drivers, from what we saw last night in the pro class, are going to have to work for those passes, which is going to be a big talking point. Before we get to that, taking a look at where the club class standings are after one race is pretty much how they finished, as Mark Doran took the win over John Gibson, and then Robert Nettle rounding out our podium. From there, you see Gerbino, Heimbucher, Bowers, Gregory, Matson, Chapman, and Martin with the top 10 finishes to kick things off on a pretty good note, I have to say. So hopefully they'll be able to kind of pick that up and carry it on here in this race today. Jake Gerbino on board with him right now. It looks like he's got himself a pretty decent run coming up the sole of the boot into the heel. Almost done with a lap, it looks like.
Yeah, and heading off into the third to last turn around this racetrack, which I make this abundantly clear every single time I do a Watkins Glen broadcast. This corner is basically my version of a sleep paralysis demon. It is so brutal heading off through there. It doesn't matter what car you're in, it's always a tough ask. These racers having to ace every single apex. This isn't the longest track in the world, especially compared to Spa 1 week ago. So it's going to feel a bit more punchy in terms of the racing that we have here today, and certainly going to add in a bit more importance into this qualifying session.
Yeah, watching Gerbino come across the line, he goes up to second, and then checking out a little bit farther down, also just coming out of the toe of the boot, Marc Rondeau in the number 011, finding himself trying to get a little bit of a time on the board, because let me check to see. Looks like, oh no, he does have at least one lap in, it looks like, but he's unfortunately sitting in 28th currently.
Yeah, so having to put his nose to the grindstone, get a good time in as the time is running out in this qualifying session. Once again, though, looking at this field being oh so close when it comes to the lap times that they have set. We talked about this a lot at that Spa race 2 weeks ago to get this season up and rolling, Joe. And I think there's a lot of truth that can be said in reference to this race as well. This is a track that these drivers are very familiar with, so look at them to be close.
In the meantime, James Martin still has the quickest time of anybody, but it's by the smallest of margins. Gerbino getting within almost 1/100th of a second with about a minute left to go. That might have to stand, I suspect. Gerbino is still out on track, but it looks like Martin has parked it for the time being. Watching Nelson bring the 114 up to the last couple corners of this lap. This one being one of the more tricky turns. And then, of course, turn 9 always seems to catch plenty of drivers out with this blind crest here.
Yeah, this was that very special turn that I was talking about a few moments ago. Such a tough ride as you head your way off through that part of the racetrack. That boot section can be very brutal. If you nail it down, you're going to be feeling really good about yourself. If you make a small little mistake through there, though, it can be a little bit tough to be able to dust yourself off. Doubly so in this qualifying session. Not a lot of opportunities for these racers to set in those good lap times, so you need to ace it right with only a couple seconds left to go here in this solo session. Once that clock strikes 0, we're done.
And indeed, we are done. So the 114, the last one to be able to set a time. And looks like he does not improve and stays farther down towards the bottom, which, of course, wraps up our qualifying for this round 2 of Series 14. And James Martin manages to take the pole, but not by much. Look at that. Jake Gerbino, 12 thousandths behind. Kellen Heimbucher will be starting from 3rd with Greg Strelzoff in the 4th position. Ryan Cowley will start from P5 as J.R. Gregory will begin from the 6th spot there in the Oregon region. Kevin Orr will be 7th with Mike Matson in 8th. Peter Sigourney starts 9th. And then rounding out your top 10, it's Dean Chapman. Then on row 6, you've got Andy Jenks flanked by Marcel Muniz in the number 004 as Aaron Sunday starts from 13th and John Gibson in P14. Robert Neville will start from 15th today. Mark Foley in P16 and then David Glen 17th. Scott Bowers then starts in the 18th position. Row 10 sees Patrick Adamczyk starting from 19th with Jeremy Hall in 20th. After that, it's Dale Green in 21st. Rex Jarawala, P22 for him as Steve Comat starts 23rd, and then 24th goes to Charlie Boyer. Mark Rondeau, like we said, needed a little bit of a better lap there. Only good enough for 25th, but he's got Jason Barnett for company as Nathan Albuhaka then will start in 27th. Gary Reese, 28th, as the last of the top 30 is Jonathan Reber and Charlie Ferrer. Then from there, it's Devin Hopkins in the 31st spot, Anthony James starting 32nd, Peter Coomer in the 33rd position, and of course, Kevin Schultz in there next to him in 34th. Chad Kasian, only good enough for 35th today. Mehmet Karachai in 36th here in the club class. The last 4 sees Christian Braun in 37th, Chris Scherber in 38th, and David Nelson 39th, with Duncan James not managing to set a time and starting last on the field in 40th. And why don't we ride around a lap, see how James Martin just squeaked this one out. Ron, you want to talk us around?
Yeah, let's look at this lap from James Martin heading down into turn number 1. Certainly going to be important come time for lap 1 at the very start of this race, but super important to nail down the run coming out there in this qualifying session as well. Keep that momentum rolling as you head your way up through the S's into 2 and 3 over that crossover bridge onto this back straightaway. Once you negotiate turn number 4, pretty much flat in these race cars, won't have to worry about that. But here's the first trouble spot. It's the inner loop, the bus stop chicane. You can see those new curves on the inside there. It is very brutal of a run heading off through there. In these sports cars, you gotta clobber those curbs. Make sure that you smash your shock absorbers as you head your way out of the carousel, the outer loop of turn number 5, through the chute into turn number 6. You're now firmly into the boot section. You gotta keep the momentum rolling as you negotiate that downhill medium speed-ish left-hander. Now you've got a hairpin to worry about in a braking zone 2. It's the uphill hairpin of toe, turn number 7 around this racetrack. Another good spot to try and get a move done, but you also have a good spot coming up right now. It's the heel, turn number 8, a good overtaking opportunity just because you've got a decent braking zone. Down 2 gears from 5th into 3rd, coming out of this turn into turn number 9. I'll continue to say it, this turn is a bane of my existence. I love Watkins, Glen, but this turn makes me question that love from time to time. Now we've got the final 2 turns, and although they're a bit on the quicker end, they're still tough to manage. That's turn number 10. Bit of a chicken's lift as you head your way off through there. Don't want to pick up a slowdown. And now through the final turn, turn number 11. Won't have to worry about track limits there. You've got a track, you've got a painted white line, a nice pretty curb, and then a solid, safer barrier. So that is going to be a lap of Watkins Glen, baked in with challenges and baked in with spots that are willing to bite these racers if they even look at this track the wrong way.
Indeed. There is the view from above with about a minute left in the warm-up, and then it's off to grid for this race. Still get about 3 corners on the warm-up as we check out our pole sitters webcam. Kind of trail cam vibes there on that with the black and white. But in the meantime, checking in with one of our podium finishers from last race. And I love the different attitudes that we're seeing in the lead up to this race as drivers take this warm-up period to kind of mentally prepare. A few drivers looking more pensive, Ron. Some of them just kind of getting a little bit of refreshment in them and looking a lot more relaxed. Others just kind of laying back and observing, it looks like.
Yeah, that's one thing I adore about having the access to the webcams, to see what these racers are kind of feeling before we head off into a race, or even during it for that matter. You get a good idea as to what their body language is, how they're feeling, whether or not they're feeling relaxed and comfortable, or whether or not they're a bit on edge. I think you have a solid mix of that. Again, this is a track that many of these racers know, but again, got a big refresh in this past iRacing season. You see the curbs on this B-roll. Looks a little bit different nowadays. They added in the blue, but that's not the only change. You got the anti-cut curbs in the first part of that inner loop. A lot of other changes around this track as well, which are certainly going to keep these racers on their toes. And again, it only being the second round of the championship, and what we saw at Spa 2 weeks ago, where the racers were rather uncomfortable throughout the race, I still think these racers need to get into their comfort zones. I'm not sure if many racers were able to kind of shake all the rust off in that race at Spa 1 week ago. And although this track is kind of similar, it's old school, it's fast, and certainly challenging, there's a lot of parts of this track that are pretty far removed from Spa. I'm not just talking about it geographically. This is a rather different racetrack, so these racers still going to be on their toes and still have a lot of stuff to worry about heading off into this race.
Indeed. And I think from what we witnessed of last night, strategy could play a rather big part on that. If you find yourself stuck in one of the packs that the Slipstream will offer up, as you can see, it's going to be a 1-hour race. We will have at least one pit stop during, as they have limited the fuel this season to 65%. And with that, it does mean that we're not anticipating seeing any tire changes out there, but trying to get your fuel right is going to be oh so important. Ryan Cowley in the number 30. Now just cruising off up towards the front of the field, looking for a nice clean start. There's a couple danger zones here at the beginning of the lap, as you've got the 90, which tends to see a lot of drivers kind of make ambitious moves, and then of course you've got the S's, which if you have an accident up there, then it tends to be pretty bad news. So got to try and mind your P's and Q's so that you don't get caught up in a giant pileup at the start. Here we go. Waiting for the call from the green flag. And there it is. Green flag is out. Oh, we get a wreck before we even get to turn 1 at the back. The 7-Eleven car looks to be all out of sorts. Somebody maybe taking avoiding action there somewhere a few rows down. Top of the field, though, does look like they are able to carry on. Chad Casion gets a meatball flag before he even gets to the start.
I'll tell you what, even after that incident coming to take the green flag, it looked like there may have been a bit more drama as they headed their way down into turn number 1. I did not like the looks of those cars going side by side, but here we go. That's a good fight for the lead.
Gerbino able to take the lead away from Martin right into the chicane for the first time. Meanwhile, we've got Strelzoff and the 210 with a big accident coming down into that inner loop. Looks like he does get away without any sort of incident into the wall, so he'll be able to carry on.
Yeah, so a quick little punt as he headed his way off through the bus stop chicane. That's the thing you got to worry about at the opening stages of this race. It's an old school racetrack. You don't have a lot of real estate to work with. Even when it comes to the runoff area, you make a small little mistake, you make a little bit of contact, you're probably going to meet one of the barriers around this track in the process of all that as well. But as we look at these racers duking it out through the boot section, looks like Gerbino was able to take that lead and start to run off into the distance as he's trying to pull that gap between himself and James Martin. Farther behind, I say farther behind, basically every other car right behind those two, still duking it out as they head their way off into 8.
Wheel to wheel for about 7th position there, as the 075 is going to be on the wrong side of the track. The 28 is going to be able to take that one away and move himself up a position. Gary Reese on board now towards the front of the field. You can see the line of cars in front of him, though. He's going to have to overtake a number of them if he wants to take a victory today. First lap is down, and unfortunately, it was not clean. Patrick Adamczyk, in the meantime, given a black flag, I would assume, for some of the incidents we saw there at the start.
Yeah, I gotta imagine that was what caused it. Unfortunate start for many of the racers involved in those incidents, as Ryan Cowley had to have a bit of a lift as he headed his way off through the S's, trying to get that move done to jump his way up into sixth. He got it done over Peter Cerglini in that number 222 car. Right now, Cowley is the cork in the bottle of a massive pack of race cars. You can see from him all the way down back to about Aaron Sunday, about 2 seconds and some change, separating a decent chunk of that top 15 as a meatball flag in the air for Peter Coomer in the 333 machine. Lots of racers having a tough start to this event. It's kind of what I feared with lap 1 here at Watkins Glen, but I wasn't expecting it coming to take the green.
Looks like Dean Chapman and John Gibson, a little bit of a tussle there as well. Chapman falls behind as we ride on board with Andy Jenks in the number 33, looking forward at this fight up ahead under braking. Very strong in comparison to the 610 car, but around the outside, ooh, could he actually maybe do that? Wow, usually there's not enough grip there. That gives him the inside into turn 9. Can he finish the job? And indeed he does.
And you can tell that was a very exciting moment because I dropped something on my keyboard. I hope that didn't get picked up on the microphone, but that shows you that these racers are starting to risk it. They're turning up that wick a little bit as we get a little bit farther along in this race. They're going to feel themselves out. They've got a good idea as to how their race cars are feeling too. I think we're already starting to see that to a certain extent with these racers, pushing the limits in terms of these overtakes and pushing the limits of their cars more and more as this race continues to develop. Again, very early stages into this event, but I'm already starting to see a bit of a change in philosophy for how these racers are attacking the opening stages of this race.
Neville with his plaid that we've come to love here in the 087, and not looking at a podium, at least where he sits right now. Currently down in 16th position, not close enough into the bus stop chicane. You can see how much the cars have to attack through here. And he's not going to be able to do much afterwards as well. Although in front of him, look at Foley and Chapman here. Very close to one another coming down into the chute. But it looks like Chapman is going to have to just play a little bit of soft defense while Foley continues to hover behind him in that 316. As we continue to see these racers now begin to strategize how exactly they're going to go about these overtakes. You mentioned it a little bit earlier on in this broadcast, Joe, talking about what we saw just a matter of 1 day ago here on RaceSpot, how those drivers tackled that pro race. We're probably going to see the exact same sort of philosophy come about. Who's going to be able to get the overtakes when? The last time I did a broadcast here at Watkins Glen, it's actually for the Radical SR10s, as we see a moment with Steve Comats in the 210 car. In those SR10s, very different from these Porsche Cup cars. They were getting the moves done off into the chicane. Don't think you could do that here in these cars. They're a little bit bigger, and the drift isn't as strong, as Comats had another moment off through the final turn, and then more racers coming to blows, that time into turn number 1, which I expected to be a bit more of a point of contention for these racers early on. Yeah, Jared Walla. Oh, looks like he had another incident. It's the 333. Found him at the wrong place at the wrong time. I said the S's are a bad place to catch cars. And yeah, okay, so this is what happened. Gar already a bit damaged, had a bobble, and someone behind him tried to check up, but the 333 failed to notice, and that's what caused quite a big incident in the meantime. The 218 of J.R. Gregory, this is in 4th place, being chased by Heimbucher and Cowley in behind him, just continuing to lay the pressure on. We've had an eventful couple first laps here, so hopefully things calm down a little bit, Ron.
Yeah, I think these racers are keeping their fingers crossed more than anybody that the race settles into some sort of groove, as we see yet again that drama at the start of the race. That is so demoralizing to have that happen as you're coming to take the green flag. I mean, these hour-long races, I talked about it a lot with our esteemed RaceSpotTV colleague, Mr. Ewan O'Leary, when him and I were doing the 70 for 70 broadcast at Road Atlanta just a couple of days ago here on RaceSpot, how these races are rather long for this season. They're 1 hour in length. So, I mean, usually it's a bit tough, even if you have a clean race and a clean start and you're running up in the front, to kind of maintain the mental side of things throughout an hour-long event where you do have pit stops to worry about, and you have a lot more stuff that you're trying to juggle as these races go along. But if you started off on a bad note, it is such a shame for these competitors, and really it gets to you. It really does get to you after a while. It's like if you're trying to cook a meal, lunch, dinner, breakfast, it doesn't matter what it is. If you start to cook a meal and you immediately chop something weird, your knife isn't sharp enough. If your meal prep starts off on a bad note, you're not even going to be able to enjoy the food by the end of it, because that's usually when stuff starts to pile up and pile up and pile up, and eventually you're just going to be disgusted with the own thing that you made.
It's quite the metaphor we've gone for here, but we've been watching the battle for the lead. Garbino ahead of Martin, and Stretsov, I think, is still within range here, that he could maybe try and get involved in this. So Stretsov is in that number 15, just kind of sitting behind there in third, the yellow and blue car. James Martin is who we're watching as we're on board with Garbino, looking off of the gearbox. But Jake managed to make that pass, and what seems like a pretty important time in the race. Like I was saying, we saw drivers have trouble to try and get by one another. So I wonder if this is going to make the difference, that he was able and willing, Ron, to be aggressive at the start.
Yeah, I think maintaining the level of aggression that you have at the start of one of these races, it really sets the trend for how you're going to race your competitors, how you're going to tackle an event like this. We've already seen it in the early stages of both this race and the one at Spa 2 weeks ago. If you start off one of these races just throwing haymakers at your competitors, sometimes it works out rather well. You certainly make the highlight reels here on RaceSpot, but you may not be your competitor's best friend in the early stages. There's a mix of philosophies in all sorts of racing series. Could be here in the Porsche Club of America, could be some of the other series that we broadcast here on RaceSpot. You can even go from series to series in real life, where a change in philosophy at the start can really affect how your competitors see you, as that's Dean Chapman kind of moved on Andy Jenks. Nice stuff into one.
It just slices up the inside. Will he regret it, though? Because this is going to give the tow back to the 33, coming up through the hill, over the S's. You can see just how quick they're already traveling up this long run towards the back straightaway. And it is going to be a defensive move from the car that just managed to get by the 33. Knows it's going to be tough, and he decides to maybe back out and try a little bit later. So Chapman holds on to that 13th position.
And I gotta say, Joe, just looking at the way those racers are heading off through that bus stop chicane, I think it may be that entire section to try and get an overtake done may be X'd off at the present moment. I think, I really have to be committed to get a move done all through there. But if the competitor that you're trying to overtake just puts on a well enough defensive drive, puts on some defensive maneuvers, I think it can hold on to that spot rather well. So we'll have to see what the philosophy is for those racers going for the moves off into that bus stop chicane. One of the greater alterations made in the update over the season break, and we'll have to keep tabs on that all throughout tonight. I certainly will. Love to see how these racers are going to try and get the moves done, as David T. Glen was trying to get a move done a couple of moments ago off into turn number 8. I said it in the track guide, I'll say it once again. That's a pretty alright overtaking opportunity. It's a tough corner to nail down. Probably not the toughest on this racetrack by far, but it's just tough enough whereby you can have those mistakes, but just easy enough whereby you could really ship it off into the turns. So David Glen doesn't get it done. That was all kind of kicked off there by the car ahead of Bowers, just getting a little bit too close to the car. Had almost made contact, it seemed. Had to check up, compromise the exit, and that's kind of kicked off the
the battle that we were witnessing. Meanwhile, David Glen might get another chance because we have plenty of racing to go. 48 minutes left on the clock. Coming up to the braking, he's not going to be near enough into the bus stop. And I will say, Ron, that yeah, from what we saw yesterday, there was a lot of drivers that made attempts at moves, but you had to be extremely aggressive and you needed some cooperation from your rivals.
Yeah, I think upon you saying that, the best term that I could bring up here is it takes two to tango. When it comes to good racing, you need both drivers working together. You need that racer going for the moves, yet you also need the racer that's nearly getting overtaken to play ball a little bit. Obviously, they're not going to let you just get that move done. Of course, it's racing. They're trying to hold on to every single spot that they can. But at the same time, you can't just completely slam that door right shut on that person trying to get the move done on you. So I think saying that it takes two to tango, it takes two to put on a good race, and we're starting to see that already. One great thing about this series that I absolutely adore is the level of respect between these competitors.
Anthony James right now behind Gary Reese in that bright purple machine, but we've switched a little bit farther ahead as well. The 222 just running around in the battle for 7th position. Peter Sigourney. And then quite a train forming behind him. Matson, Eunice, Orr, Gibson, and Sunday all in there. And we kind of saw this yesterday as well. Just a lot of draft trains starting to form. Not a DRS train like we often hear referred to, because they don't have those in these cars, but it's just as frustrating. Everybody in front of you still has that advantage of the slipstream. Aaron Sunday at the back of it gets a front row seat to the action. If any starts to happen, somebody going defensive with just a little bit up the way.
I think there's a little bit of racing going on a little bit farther up the road. I think it was Marcel Yunus and Mike Matson who were duking it out off into the chicane. That's actually allowed a bit of a gap to grow out between themselves and Peter Sigourney in that 222 machine. But no, you got this line of, as that's running a little bit deep off into the boot section there down to turn number 6. Marcel Yunus missed the apex a little bit, but thankfully for his case at the very least, he's able to hold on to that spot, if not losing out on even more time between himself and the 222 machine now a little bit farther up the road. Those two cars were basically right on top of each other a matter of about a half a lap ago, and now you can see that gap has ballooned as we take a look at that move that Yunus was able to get, and you can see him very aggressive with that inside curb all through the inner loop. I'm a little bit surprised by that, Joe. I'm split, because I feel like that curb, the bus stop, it's one of those sections where it's either all or nothing on the curbs.
Exactly, and we've seen a lot of cars bounding over the last night and a half here, so it does upset the car. You got to be aggressive with it, but it comes with quite a few dangers in the process, so you got to be on the ball as Eunice continues to lead Matson down into turn 1 once again. About a quarter of the way through the race, we're going to check in with Cowley here, sitting in 6th. Heimbucher just in front of him. And if he can get enough of a run, he might have an opportunity. Steve Komatz, in the meantime, being given his own black flag. So the 30, will he look to the outside? Nope, the door has been left open. He's not willing to try it, though, and you saw a big lift down the backstretch.
Yeah, I just don't think that these racers will be able to get those moves done successfully, at least, unless they have an almighty run heading down that back straightaway. Couldn't really see it there. I brought this up a little bit earlier on in the show, and I'll bring it up again. As you can see, takes two to tango, takes two to spin as they head their way off through the final turn. That's the number 29 car, and Steve Komatz in the 210 involved in that incident down into the turn, bumper to bumper action, and around they go. Unfortunate off through the final turn around this racetrack. Rather susceptible to moments like that. And actually, I was gonna say something in reference to that final turn. I think we'll bring that a little bit later on once we get to the pit stops. I was gonna mention the pit entry, which is certainly a little bit sketchy around here. But anyways, talking about how these racers will go about those overtakes, I talked about earlier on in reference to the Radical SR10 on the iRacing platform. One of the strongest drafters, I remember the broadcast we did last season with those cars, and how powerful the draft is in them. It basically makes it seem like the car in front is standing still. These cars don't have nearly as powerful of a draft as those cars definitely an apples to broccoli comparison, but regardless, I think unless you have a noticeable advantage speed-wise heading onto that back straightaway, probably best to hang on and wait for your competitor a little bit farther up the road to maybe have a trip off into the wall, the decent amount of heavy braking zones between yourself and the end of the lap heading off through the inner loop.
Cowley showing us his on board. Oh no, in the 087. Unfortunately, facing sideways at a very vulnerable position there on the exit of 1. Thankfully, everybody was very heads up for Neville, and nobody wound up T-boning him. So he'll get it back up to speed. But look at how much that loss of speed counts for. Many cars still going by, some of which actually now a bit plugged up by this action, which helps him out, but certainly gives him a lot of pressure from behind. And Neville looks like he's in a good spot now coming into the braking of the inner loop. Those behind him have got some work to do since they've kind of lost touch with those in front.
And all that drama, it was Anthony James who was barreling up to the scene of that moment as the 087 was trying to keep that momentum rolling and get back up to speed. So you can see that spin that brought him to a grinding halt in the first place. But heading off through the S's at the beginning of this lap, we saw it a little bit earlier on in this broadcast. We saw it get put on full display right there. You can't really go side by side flat heading off through there. You're going to have to give a big lift, a lot of compromise will have to be made if racers decide to go side by side off through that section, regardless of what their tire situation is, what their fuel situation is. That is always going to be a sketchy ride. And I think that moment that we saw as he was trying to get back up and rolling just about proved that that section may be a quiet contender for the most sketchy point of this racetrack here in these Porsche Cup cars.
I mean, it's extremely dangerous. That is for sure. And I want to give a tip of the hat to Neville because he kind of lurched forward a little bit and then he realized, no, I really shouldn't move when there's cars coming because that makes me a moving target. I feel like safe re-entries has been a bit of a bugbear as of late in these first few rounds. So glad to see some drivers making smart decisions in the heat of the moment and helping prevent things from getting worse out there. Back to the 30 car once again. And coming around onto the chute as we ride on board with Cowley, going after the number 14 of Heimbucher for that 5th position. It's getting ever closer. Look at how much Heimbucher is closed on Gregory, enough that he's trying to show his nose down into the toe of the boots, but nothing doing.
As he's going to try and take that run on the outside through there. Look at that, keeping that momentum rolling. That's one thing I love about turn number 6. You can make different lines work, whether you're on the inside or the outside. Just keep the momentum rolling onto that small little flat out. I can't even call it a flat out blast. It's basically a flat out firecracker as you head your way off between turn number 6 and 7. I think that's the first time any sort of phrase like that has ever been said. I just realized it's actually turn number 7 and 8. My apologies there. But no, that small little flat out section may not seem like much. It is by no means the longest flat out blast on this track. In fact, it's probably one of the shortest, but it's just enough for these racers to get close and get side by side.
Let's see if they get side by side down into turn 1, because this is a big run from the number 30 of Ryan Cowley. And no, he's not able to make that one stick. So while we've got an opportunity, we want to give a mention to Princess Cruises because they're the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. Cowley gets another in the meantime. And a nice move up into the inner loop. He's proven us wrong there, Ron, managing to make that pass into the chicane.
Oh, so I thought I was going to see a bout of side-by-side racing down into turn number 6. That's usually how it goes, at least when it comes to predictions from me. I make one, and that usually ages like milk in the Nevada sun. As James Martin, I think he had a moment coming out of turn number 6. I could see a little bit of damage on the back end of that race car. Could see some dust and dirt up in the air. Oh, he didn't actually go off the track. It was his competitor, the number 15 of Greg Sterzolf, that had the moment heading off into the dirt. But Martin Very odd. That's the first time we've seen a racer have a sideways snap out of turn number 6. I have a feeling it may not be the last, though. That's a very challenging turn.
It absolutely is, and it can wind up being a race-ending mistake in there very often with how close the barriers are through there. In the meantime, we're getting towards pit stops apparently, because it looks like Gregory is decided now is the time to come on in that 218 machine. So this is a bit earlier than we usually expect, though, Ron, because we tend to see no pit stops until at least halfway.
Yeah, an oddball call from JR, our RaceSpotTV colleague, and considering I've worked with him for just about as long as I've been doing this iRacing broadcasting stuff, it's very fitting that JR would make this oddball call, because he's a bit of an oddball himself. I'm sorry, JR, that's mean. I love you, buddy. But he's down in pit lane right now, maybe going to be a trendsetter potentially. You know, this is a very intriguing track and much different than Spa, so I wonder if these racers will go for those much different strategy calls, maybe out of necessity.
Back through the inner loop we go once again. A little bit of a 4-car battle here. The 19 kind of stuck in this group as well. If you make one little mistake, as we've seen, it can really cost you, especially if you lose momentum. I feel like there's a few very critical corners. Turn 1, really the obvious one, but we've also seen drivers who have that poor run coming out of here, out of the toe of the boot, Ron, cause big issues.
Yeah, heading off through this part of the track. I talked about in the track guide a little bit earlier on in this show about how challenging the entire boot section is from the entry heading down the hill out of the outer loop into the chute of turn at number 6. Whether it be that, whether it be down into the toe, which it's an odd corner that it feels like a medium speed hairpin. It feels like a hairpin, and yet it doesn't feel like a hairpin at the same time. It's a very peculiar part of the track, that. And turn number 8, it's a corner that I personally love, but you know, a lot of turns around this racetrack can be a bit like Marmite. Some people love it, others absolutely despise it with a burning passion, and that boot section may be one of the most divisive parts of this track, at least from the experience that I've had speaking to the racers that I have been able to commentate on over the years.
Interestingly, I thought we saw John Gibson coming down in a pit lane there, so it looks like he might be also making a bit of an early call as we come back towards the battle up at the front. Yeah, there he is right there. He finds his box, hits his mark, so that's the good news. We'll see if he comes out in clear air. That's the main thing that I worry about with these earlier stops, especially if you're up towards the front. It can so easily put you back in traffic, but I guess the drivers towards the back don't have to worry as much.
You know, that's a fantastic point that you bring up there, Joe. This is the sort of racetrack where when you come in for that early call to come down pit lane, or even a little bit later on in this race, frankly, once most of the pit stops have been dealt with, if you come out in the midst of a hornet's nest, it's not going to be very good. It's like walking out of your front door first thing in the morning, ready to start a brand new day in the world, and then you get stung by a bee. That's basically what's like saying, okay, I've got some new stuff I've got the pit stop worried about, and now I can look ahead to the rest of this race. And then you come out of the pits and it is just pure unbridled pandemonium. That is, I talked about demoralizing things as I nearly thought we were going to see a Porsche Cup car bump and run off through turn number 7. But no, if you come out of the pits and you find yourself in the midst of like a 16-car battle, you're just going to sigh and think, okay, I just want to get through this without incident.
Yeah, better hope that they're going to be pitting as quickly as they can as well. This is Boyer up in front of Bowers, along with Glen behind, Rondeau in that group, and I think Abu Haka, yeah, there he is in the Rexing machine there. So we've got about a 5-car train all battling for what is 14th position currently. Hopping on board with Nathan now onto the main straight. The 958 car going to try and, whoa, see if he can take advantage of that right there. Rondeau glancing against the wall out of the final turn. He still gets the momentum. Glen is not going to defend, and he might be able to get the spot. Oh, but he locks up the inside, and it's a 2-for-1 deal for Abu Haka. Smooth move.
Hey, buy one, get one free, and that's exactly what he did down into turn number 1. Brilliant stuff from Albahaka. He makes up 2 spots in 1 shot. Well done. A lockup down into the turn. Gonna cost out some time for those competitors. Rondeau now gonna have to try and get his stuff collected, get back into the swing of things, and maybe try and reclaim some spots before we have those pit stops. Usually a pretty big indicator that the pit stops are certainly upon us, considering we've had racers come down pit lane thus far. But if these racers are eyeballing a pit stop in the next couple of laps, you can tell, because they will start to turn up that wick and get even more aggressive with every single passing lap, going for those moves, going for those dives and ascents. We already saw it there in turn number 1 a few moments ago. And look at this. This was some heads-up driving from Albahaka.
I mean, just beautifully executed. He saw what was happening in front of him, focused on his turn in, and absolutely nailed it. J.R. Gregory, by the way, in terms of pit stops, is the earliest driver or highest driver to have pitted so far. A little bit of a close moment for Boyer once again, with Bowers still threatening him wherever he can. But if they start battling, well, we already know that the car behind has a pretty good idea of how to try and get them both at once.
Yeah, he's already gotten a taste of that 2-for-1 deal. He may be clipping some more coupons throughout the rest of this race, as Kevin Orr has made the call to come down pit lane. The number 36 machine, as we have some more pit stops beginning right now. It started off as a slow but sure trickle, and I think it may turn into a full-on monsoon in the not too far off future. Scott Bowers making that call to come down pit lane in the 917 machine. I said I was going to bring this up a little bit earlier on, and now feels like a good time to mention it. The pit entry around here at Watkins Glen, it's a little bit terrifying for all parties involved, ain't it?
It absolutely is. As our viewers may have noticed, it's pretty much on the racing line, and you can't really take the corner at full speed. So drivers have to be aware. In fact, a lot of series, and I'll double check to see if they have special rules for this one, will require drivers to hold to the right-hand side coming into that final turn to indicate that they plan to pit in, so that drivers will know to not go full force into the back of their competitor. In the meantime, the number 19 here just cruising along and trying to see where that is. That is Mike Matson, actually. Peter Sigourney just in front of him. So for 7th place, actually might as well call it, it looks like 6th. I think that's Eunice. Yes, it is.
And Marcel Eunice, who put on a pretty all right move not too terribly long ago in this race, still piecing together a very solid drive right now in that 004 machine. We'll have to keep tabs on him throughout the rest of the race, but certainly looking good, as definitely a little bit spread out in that battle for P6, but still a lot of cars that he can cover with a rather big blanket, but a blanket nonetheless. Keeping tabs now on Mike Matson and Peter Sigourney as they nearly go side by side off into turn number 1. The defensive maneuver from the 22 machine, trying to the 222 machine, my apologies, as he headed his way off into the turn. But look at the 19 all over the back of him, trying to get a good run out of turn number 1. I mentioned it in the track guide after qualifying. That first turn around here may be the most important corner on the entirety of the racetrack. If you get a good exit out there, you're going to be smelling like a bed of roses. If not, you're going to be in for a world of hurt down that backstretch into the bus stop.
Yeah, we've already seen it a couple times, just illustrated how important it is. A little bit deeper here, coming into the corner from Peter Sigourney, or excuse me, from Mike Matson. That is Sigourney in front of us right now. I do like the fact that you can take a couple different lines into some of these corners. I feel like the banking kind of opens that up a little bit, Ron.
Yeah, it really does. You know, you can see these racers decide to take a bit more liberties with it, so to speak. Keep the speed rolling, be able to utilize that to help you out. It is a very odd comparison. Back in my karting days, I used to do a lot of autocross stuff, and there were some times in which the track designers would set the course up perfectly, and we would have a little bit of banking to help us out through the turns. And back in the karts, especially with the junior karts I was running with really hard tires, any small little advantage can certainly help you as we take a look at this battle involving Albahaka. He's now trying to get P13 from Charlie Bauer right in front. These two cars rather close as they they head their way off through turn number 9 into 10 right about now. Will either of them make that call to come down pit lane and break up this battle a little bit? We'll just have to wait and see. But Obahaku had a pretty good bit of luck with that moment down into turn number 1 a few moments ago, looking to steal P13. Actually, no, he won't, as he's the latest to come down pit lane.
And he really attacks the cones. You could see him lock him up on his way in, but it looks like he did not get a penalty. Yeah, Albahaka having a great race so far, but he's got to execute on the second half, if you will, because we have passed that halfway marker. Taking back a look up to the 30 once again, and things starting to erupt as the 14 looking the long way around. Cowley, Martin, Heimbucher have been unable to separate this entire time, but it looks like Cowley still holds the upper hand. Yeah, so the super glue keeping them stuck together at the present moment. But as we ride on board of the drop, the number 14 car, I thought we were going to see a move down into the toe. A dive down the inside of turn number 7 can work. But how short of an entry it was going to be, how shallow of an entry it was going to be down into the turn. I think that would have been a bit risky from Kellen Heimbucher. We'll have to continue to follow these battles and see how they all evolve once we have those pit stops fully taken care of. That's another thing to raise. Of course, the strategy content super important. Trying to figure out when these racers have to come down pit lane, what sort of pit stops they have to go under, how long they spend down pit lane can really decide how these fights are going to work out. A driver well farther up the road could have a slow stop. Maybe they missed their marks. I think we saw a little bit of that this past week at Spa. Well, these past 2 weeks, I should say, at Spa. We saw some racers have those mistakes with those pit entries, either picking up a black flag for speeding on entry, speeding on exit, an unsafe pit entry potentially, which is certainly a lot easier to pick up here at the Glen than it is at Spa. But you can still have those small little moments that can add up, and if you have a small little mistake down pit lane, may not be much, may be just 1 mile an hour over or 1 inch over that yellow line on pit lane entry or exit, but that can be a real game ender. Gotta really mind yourself on that. You make a great point that it's so easy to wreck things just by being a little bit off and not really paying attention in the heat of the moment. Right now, the heat of the moment for these drivers is actually for a podium spot. Cowley up at the front of it. In the meantime, it looks like, we've gone back to Eunice now here, a little bit farther back. So this is for 6th position. Peter Sigourney with Mike Matson just behind him. But this is honestly looking very, very similar to what we saw last night, because I'm seeing now that things have settled down, it looks like once you're kind of in this group, unless you're willing to be aggressive, you're kind of stuck there. Yeah, there's something that needs to get pushed to any of these racers to kind of break the stranglehold, for lack of a better term, that they find themselves in a situation like this. You're just stuck behind. You're waiting for something to break, something to change. And whether or not that change could be one of these racers making that call to come down pit lane independent from the rest and blowing it wide open, we'll just have to find out. Holy cow, that could have ended in tears as they had their way up through the turn. There's probably going to be a pit stop from the number 222 of Peter Sigourney. Yes, it will. He's in the pit lane right about now. One of the latest drivers to make that call to come down pit lane, and one of the first to make that call to come down pit lane from a solid spot up in the north end of the field. And I'm sure Matson was woken up by that one as well. I kind of sucked in a breath myself seeing that happening. I'm really glad we were able to get away with it. Matson versus Chapman up towards the top of the hill once again. 19 for the blue car of Matson. Dean Chapman in behind in the black and red, weaving back and forth, sees an opportunity, but he's a little bit too far back. So he just backs out of it a little bit. Marcel Yunus in the 004 just in front of them. Would probably appreciate if they continued battling this hard, but we're going to jump forward once again. Yeah, that was a little bit sketchy off the corner. Oh, and why is the number 15 slowing as they head their way down to the turn? Is that, I first got distracted. You're right, that struts off.
Yeah, I was wondering what the deal was here. Potentially a slowdown that he had to serve as a result of something, maybe through the bus stop chicane. I mean, the slowdowns can last that long, but certainly looked unnatural. I was thinking, was he just feeling bad for the tires on the number 14 of Kellen Heimbecker? Had a huge sideways snap coming out of turn at number 6, but no, losing out on a decent amount of time there. That had to have been a slowdown, which I'm shocked we haven't mentioned it up to this point, Joe, about how easy it is to pick up a slowdown around this racetrack. I talked about the track limits a little bit earlier on in the show, and that is 2 blades on that sword in reference to incident points, which can get accumulated rather easily. You can pick them up like Pokemon cards throughout this 1 hour long race. You also have to worry about the slowdowns, which we talked about a lot at Spa, those being a real detriment. Here at Watkins Glen, especially if you pick one up coming out turn number 1, that's not a very fun moment either.
No, I mean, you talk about a race killer. Even just one of those could set you well back if you're in one of these big groups. In the meantime, we got more drivers in. Looks like Charlie Ferrer is going to be joining. Marcel Yunus already down in his pit stall. There is the 004 now and taking service. So where will he emerge? He was just ahead of Sigourney. So let's try and spot to see whether or not he will emerge ahead of Peter Sigourney, who is already been out and putting some good laps in now that he's refueled. So his car will be slightly heavier. But as we watch, I think he's ahead.
I think he may have gone ahead there. I think that was a jump.
Wow. So unfortunately did not quite work out. Did come out ahead of Gibson, it looks like. So yeah, he's lost a fair bit of time. So that wound up being actually a good call. I thought the extra fuel would mean he'd wind up a little bit weighted down, but it shows you what I know. I'm no strategist.
Oh, if I was trying to work out the strategies for these racers, I wouldn't even be able to see the computer monitor about a foot away from my face. This entire room would be filled up with smoke coming out of my ears.
So, thankfully, we'll just try and stick to the commentating, but Mark Foley in the 316 machine, currently giving chase. I think with those who have recently come out, I think that is Sigourney just in front of us right now. So Foley working hard down the main straight. I'm not sure whether or not he's got enough here, although he is going to show himself just a little bit. But I think it's wise maybe to try to back up the corner, try to get the launch, see if he can do better up through the S's.
As they head their way off through what has proved to be another challenging part of this racetrack. I'm trying to think at this point, what would probably be these racers' most challenging part of the circuit. We've seen our fair share of moments sprinkled all throughout this circuit. How once we get after this race and have a chat with some of these racers, I would love to know what they're thinking in terms of the challenge around this circuit. But riding on board with Aaron Sunday, you could see those racers having to slam into those curves off through the chicane. It is so tough through there. It's a lot better than if you're running in an open wheel car, because if these racers took to the curves the same way they do in these Porsche Cup cars in open wheel, that'd probably end poorly. But here we go. Mark Foley thought about it as they headed their way off into turn number 7. Not able to get that move done. Would have had to have been a dive from the 316 on the 331, but it is still close quarter stuff between those competitors. It's going to give the drivers a little bit farther up the road, a bit of breathing room. That's a lap car a little bit farther up the road from these racers. You have to go after that to find the number 33 of Andy Jenks. But either way, the gap gun balloon out between those racers once these two start to battle, which I have a feeling they will be doing rather soon.
Indeed, both do still owe us a pit stop. Wonder if we'll see Foley maybe try to duck in here. Whoa, that's definitely an incident point there for Aaron Sunday, going way wide into the penultimate turn. Neither is going to pit this time, although Foley awful close to the wall, trying to maximize his exit, get the speed down the main straight. That forces another defense here from Aaron Sunday, but they will remain in position as they were. All right, when we get a shot, let's head over to Princess Cruises, because we love to mention that they're the 2025 PCA title sponsor As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 14, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to PCA Concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. So riding on board in the meantime, still chasing on Sunday. It looks like Mark Foley's going to have to try again a little bit later. And I think you mentioned, that is not Jenks in front of him. Yeah, that's not Jenks there in front of him. So that's a lapped car that is looking to maybe stay out of the way. Oh, but he does not lift, coming down the laces of the boot. And this could be a problem off the corner if he continues to compromise them.
Yeah, it should be known that Jenks actually made that call to come down pit lane at the end of that last lap. So these two were able to gain a spot, but now that they've got that lap traffic dealt with in the small low flat app left between 7 and 8, they've now got a battle for P7 and P8. Very fitting how that works. We're just going to raise the lap traffic discussion, though, Joe, as Jake Gerbino has actually made the call to come down pit lane from the race lead, and he's joined by your P2 runner, Ryan Cowley. I'm going to have to save that point about the lap traffic as we've got another batch of pit stops.
Indeed. In fact, a much larger batch. This is getting towards the end of the pit window, so not too great of a surprise as our strategies converge, but worth mentioning that we are down to maybe the last dozen cars that do need to make a pit stop. And at that point, anybody who wants to make an overtake, they're going to have to do it on track.
And that's going to be super, super tough. We're going to start to see these racers pull up that aggression as there's a 30 coming out of the pits. That's Ryan Cowley jumping in front of Jake Gerbino. Interesting stuff from Cowley. We'll have to keep an eye on it, the pit stop times from those racers as we jump back to the action with Mark Foley going side by side there on Sunday down into the chicane. Look at Foley having a go. Oh, no! Big moment, and Foley avoided it. Expertly done there as Sunday going to hit the wall.
I mean, it's rare that you can see cars avoid accidents that close to them. Thankfully, it looks like it was not a big hit into the tire barrier for Sunday, so he gets the car moving. And I checked the pit stop times. Most drivers at about 14 seconds. That's what Cowley did. Gerbino, 18 seconds. Now, I don't know if he got his fuel timing wrong or what, but let's take another look at this replay. Wheel to wheel into the corner. Respect given from both of them. Great to see, but just a bit too much speed, it seems, from Sunday.
Yeah, both of them had their fair share of drama all through that bus stop chicane. It's just that Foley had it for the first half and Sunday saved it for the second. He kept it out of the barrier for the most part, had a small little tap, which I think has made that bumper slightly askew. He still has to make that call to come down pit lane, so that's not too much harm or foul done in the midst of all that, but either way, big amount of drama through there. But to touch on the very lengthy pit stop from Jake Gerbino, that is a costly mistake. I mentioned this not too long ago in reference to the pit stops. It's stuff that is in your control and stuff that's a little bit out of your control as well that can really affect how your race is going to go. Unfortunate for him, a small little miscalculation, whether that's down to any sort of software he has, potentially getting the numbers a little bit messed up there. Whatever the case may be, it's still going to sting the same way. Jake Gerbino, if he wants to have a shot at winning this race, he has got to reel in your now race leader of Ryan Cowley in that number 30 car, who he rode on board with down into turn number 2. He's got to reel him in rather quick. I will say, though, that gap not too large at the end of the day, only about 1.25 seconds between those racers.
Kind of surprised. Was Cowley in P2 before the pit stops? Because I thought there was a couple cars between them, but I might just be misremembering as we jump back with Chris Sherburne here in 5th position. He still owes us a pit stop, though, so he is kind of slightly out of position at this stage. There's not too many cars. In fact, oh, no, Chris Sherburne's the only car that has failed to stop at this stage, and I don't think he's going to fight this too hard, as that looks like either Martin or Gregory that just escaped through.
And to touch on Ryan Cowley, he was in P2 once we got those pit stops up and rolling, and the gap between those racers wasn't. I mean, it was pretty big, but you know, we've seen larger gaps. I mean, compared to some of the gaps that we saw in qualifying, it's a vast yawning chasm between the two. It was about 2.8 seconds, right about that 3 second to 2.5 second window between those competitors. Once we got those pit stops up and rolling, which could be part of the reason why Ryan Cowley doesn't have a huge advantage over Jake Gerbino. Gerbino did himself a lot of favors in the first half of the race. Certainly, it would have been a heck of a lot better if he had a much shorter run down pit lane, but damage limitation for sure, as we'll have to keep eyes on those two. Same exact time that they came down pit lane, very different though. I wonder if Ryan Cowley will have to do any sort of fuel saving at the end. Gerbino certainly doesn't.
I mean, based on what I'm seeing, I feel like Cowley must have gotten it right, or at least close to right, because he's pretty on par with most of the other cars around him. It was just Gerbino who's the outlier here. So, I mean,
Gerbino dropping back. Is Gerbino dropping back? He's down to 5th. What's going on to Gerbino?
I'm not sure. I'm watching to see. The gap is growing a little bit, but we'll keep an eye as Charlie Boyer is going to be able to slide up the inside and take 16th place away. Nicely done. Oh, but we're going to go 3 wide off the corner. My goodness, that's not going to work here in the S's. And unfortunately for the 013, he discovers just how wrong he was to try and make that work. In fact, to lose yet another position.
He got shown the door contact being made. Very lucky to keep it out of the wall. Ever the opportunist, though, down the inside. That was insanity as they headed their way up through that part of the track. Well done, though, those racers. Even though there was contact being made, Oaxaca, ever the opportunist, he made that 2-for-1 deal work a little bit earlier on in the race. I think he may have had a similar moment there, as here was what happened to Jake Gerbino. It's a moment down into turn number 1. Around he's going to go, and from a surefire win to a P2 with the chance to claw it back, he's not going to find himself barely clinging on to his spot inside the top 5. One more mistake, and J.R. Gregory may be able to take that spot.
Gibson versus Eunice here, and in fact, I think Gibson may have just gotten that spot. Yeah, so Eunice giving up the 12th position. It must have been just that last corner or two that he unfortunately got demoted. And John was one of those takers with slightly earlier stops, but it's working out quite well for him. In fact, a relatively early stop. That was 12 laps ago, I'm seeing.
Yeah, will we be able to make it to the end of the race on that? I mean, the laps are nowhere near as long here as they were 2 weeks ago at Spa, but still, that is... We'll have to keep eyes on that. That is going to be interesting to see if that strategy call works out, as Mike Matson and Dean Chapman, so close to making contact through 3, and they do make contact through 4.
Around he goes, Chapman hard into the wall on the other side now, and the car is damaged. You cannot keep it going straight, it looks like. Surely he's going to have to come into pit lane after that. Disappointing after he was having such an excellent run at the top end of the field. And again, it seems like some of these risk versus reward situations are given the risk, but unfortunately reward is not there, because like we said, 2 wide here doesn't tend to work.
Yeah, I even talked about earlier on in this show about how challenging it is to go through that section single file, let alone side by side. If you're off the racing line, you're in for a world of hurt. You gotta lift, you gotta really change up your line through there if you have a small little trip up, but going through there side by side, that's just not going to work. An unfortunate moment for the both of them to get taken out of a good spot because of an incident with really no time left to go in this race in the grand scheme of it all. I mean, about 11 minutes left after that incident took place. Now 10 and a half minutes left on the clock. Compare that to the 60 that we started with, though, and that is basically no time at all. So they're going to have to put their nose to the grindstone big time if they want to be able to make it that time up, as we just saw a few moments ago. A moment for the 013 machine of Charlie Boyer, who's down into turn number 8, running a little bit wide and losing touch with the cars a little bit farther up the road.
Yeah, so Bowers, Albahaca, Glen, they all start to scoot away. And checking in with the 147, Jonathan Reaver here, sitting in 25th. I believe that is going to be Kevin Schultz or possibly Gary Reese there in front of him. at this stage. Oh, but he washes out extremely wide coming through the final turn. I think he was wise to try and lift. Yes, he lost a lot of time, but at least the car's in one piece.
Yeah, at the end of the day, at the end of this race, more importantly, if you're just there at the end with a car that is all together, you don't have various bits of bodywork that are strewn across upstate New York, I think these racers are going to take that as a positive come time for the very end of this. Watkins Glen, I mean, there are many races throughout this season. Looking at the calendar, Spa last week certainly proved that in that very challenging opening weeks of this Porsche Club of America season. But all throughout it, we have got tracks where really the saying to finish first you have to finish is going to be rather prevalent, and I feel like here at Watkins Glen, potentially the most old school of the tracks that we're visiting all season long with the least amount of runoff area. This is the sort of racetrack. Oh, as Bowers proving my point with a spin coming out of turn number 7.
But well held. It's not in the barrier. It gives a little bit of a dink, but it should be fine since that's just tire barriers there and has some flex, but he's going to be frustrated with himself, no doubt. Just goosed it a little bit too hard from what it looked like on board.
Yeah, just trying to squeeze on that throttle pedal coming out of the turn, keep that momentum rolling, but once again proving the challenging nature of this racetrack. When it bites, it can bite hard, and that is a very discouraging moment to have that happen, especially right at the end of one of these races. I'm sure the tires are probably screaming in agony as a result of that moment too, losing out on a boatload of time. His tires have probably been turned down into rectangles. Thankfully though, outside of maybe a couple of paint chips taken out of the front bumper of that car and maybe a little bit of damage, I think he's gotten away with one. Dean Chapman in the 610 has had a moment out of 1.
Has he had a moment, or did he come out of pit lane? I wonder if he took his spare car and is back running. Well, never mind. You were right. He's had a moment, and he also locks them up, tries to stay out of it. He also has slight contact, but I'm not seeing damage on the car. This is completely gone awry for Dean Chapman since a couple laps ago.
Yeah, and he center punched a cone in the midst of all that as well. So plus 2 seconds for Dean Chapman to take out that pit exit cone. The autocrossers tuning into the show will definitely get that reference. But unfortunate moment for him. His race was going rather well, but just as we've gotten to the end, it can fall away from you. That's one thing that doesn't get mentioned a whole lot by the end of these races. These drivers can be rather tired. You know, after an hour of racing, well, not exactly an hour, but close enough to it, whereby we'll count it as an hour. These racers probably just hoping for that checkered flag to come out. They want to make it to the end, and usually at the end of these races, as the cars fall away and the drivers' minds begin to fall away as well, that's when those mistakes really start to pile up. And around a track like this, which is so demanding and so unforgiving, you can really see that get put on full display.
In the meantime, we catch up on a battle here with the 060 as well. And this is Jeremy Hall behind Aaron Sunday. He's got Chris Sherburne in behind him, Scott Bowers in this quartet. And like you said, yeah, I think the checkered flag will be quite a relief for a few drivers. Others are having the time of their life. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. For the drivers that have lost position, somebody's going to have to gain.
And, you know, as we continue to see this racing develop and these racers running the laps away, I want to share a quick little story upon you saying that. Back when I was in high school, I think it was in my sophomore year, I actually made videos talking about how the Newton's laws of physics applied to racing. They are very old, and I will never share those because I don't want the people that I work with to hear what 17-year-old me sounded like. But that's just a nice little memory that popped into my head from a couple of years ago.
A little bit of weaving back and forth down the back straightaway as the car of Jeremy Hall has to either attack or defend. I'm not sure which that was really intending to be. He kind of needs a bit of both at this stage. Meanwhile, and Cowley might not have this one wrapped up like we thought. Heimpuker is suddenly right behind him. The gap between them, 0.4 of a second, with about 3 laps left to go on the clock. Maybe a bit more than that. He's going to have to turn up the wick now.
Yeah, now that Heimbucher is right there in the coattails of that number 30 car, we got to think of the races that these two have had up to this point. Very different afternoons/evenings for these competitors, and let's see what they'll be able to do. Heimbucher running a little bit wide out of turn number 1, using that run out of it, trying to find any way in the book to get past this number 30 car of Ryan Cowley. Catching up is one thing, overtaking is another. I've read that in a Fortune Cookie before, but for this number 14 car of Kellen Heimbucher, gotta go for the move anyways. He thought about it, but the 30 car, Ryan Cowley throwing a little bit of a block as they headed their way down the back straightaway. Was just gonna say, 14 car, that had a lot of challenges up to this point. This is just another one in the line.
Heimbucher clearly on it. He's hungry. He knows he's got a great opportunity on this one. He's forced into defensive line from the number 30. He's going to have to really be on it here because no doubt Kellen's going to be throwing everything he can to try and take this win away. That said, it is about a second and a half down to Streltsov. So the more they fight, the more they're going to open themselves up to making this a 3-car battle. You can see a little glance in the mirror from the number 30 of Ryan Cowley as he knows that he is being threatened by Kellen.
I can feel the tension building in this battle, and they can't get too lost in the drama as well. If they start to duke it out, more cars are going to get involved in it. You can see some cars hounding from behind. It's a bit of a gap they have developed between your P2 runner of Heimbucher and your P3 runner of Streltsov, but still, that is not a large gap at the end of the day. And with about 2 laps of racing action left here at the Glen, it's Cowley and Heimbucher. Heimbucher having to lift a little bit all through the final turn as the handling falls away of these race cars. That final turn going to get more and more sketchy. That safer barrier on the outside going to loom more and more. I think Cowley has the speed on entry to the turns. I think Heimbucher has the speed on entry to the turns, but I think Cowley actually has the speed midway through and on the exits. But Heimbucher keeping that momentum rolling. You see that gap closing as they head their way on the backstretch.
Yeah, and that better exit is really what you want in this situation. And I think for Cowley, the good news is he has that ever desirable track position. We saw a similar situation towards the end of the pro race where if the driver just played a good defense, just focused on their line, they held ground. So Cowley, if he was watching that, hopefully has taken that lesson to heart.
You know, this is a big strategy game. Never mind the pit stops that we've already had to worry about. Come time for the end of this race, you gotta wonder, how exactly do you go about these battles? Do you defend? Do you just spend your time looking in the rear view mirror to see where that competitor is, try and position your car exactly right? Or do you just go on the offense, push that car to the absolute limits of control and try and get every single 10th or 100th or 1000th of a second that you can? Is this a numbers game? Any small little difference, any small little incremental gain can make a huge difference come time for the end of this race. But as they head their way up through turn number 10 for the second to last time in this race show, the white flag going to be in the air, and for Ryan Cowley, it is going to be potentially the most stressful final lap for him in quite some time.
No doubt, because he's got 3 other drivers breathing down his neck. Heimbucher, Streltsov, Martin are all right there. He's going to have to just nail every apex, every corner exit on this one last lap if he hopes to take a win. And he heads up the hill for the final time in this race. The pit stop strategy helped him out. A little bit of luck in that he had a decent stop and his rival had a bad stop. But now he's going to have to work for it. The 14's got to run. Oh, he leaves the door open. That was a little bit of a weave there, though. He's smiling, though. He's having a good time. But he's got to worry that he doesn't make a blocking move.
Yeah, that looked a little bit borderline there with Ryan Cowley. I'm sure Race Control may have to take a look at that. I'm sure Heimbucher not going to be happy in the slightest about that. It's still not over yet. As you can see, the 30 car running a little bit wide, missing that apex down into turn number 6. It's just enough for Heimbucher to close up that gap once again. This is going to be a very tense end to this race. There's another trip up from the 30.
Left the door open just a little bit. I think he was trying to square off that corner. Heimbucher just behind him, almost got his nose underneath. There's another big smile with a sigh there from Cowley. He's thriving on this pressure. He's loving this battle. hopefully he's going to love the result from it as he comes around turn number 9. Just 2 more corners to go. It's very hard to pass in these last 2 turns, and I think he knows it. Now he looks much more calm at this phase. Ryan Cowley, with only half a second to spare, just behind him over Heimbecker, takes it to the line, and it is going to be victory for Ryan Cowley in race number 2 for the club class.
And you can see that sigh of relief, immediate sigh of relief as he comes across the line. That had to have been a nerve-wracking end to this race. He may have been smiling and laughing and clapping his hands at the end of that race externally, but internally he was probably feeling every single emotion known to mankind. Dean Chapman, as we run on board with him, he's had a wild race up to this point. Maybe thought about going for a move towards the end of Albuquerque, but hold on to P15 at the very end of this race. But well done to Cowley. Brilliant drive from him.
Jeremy Hall, wheel to wheel, coming through the penultimate turn. Like we said, that's tough to try and make that work. Back on board with Scott Bowers, goes for the over-under, but he runs out of straightaway before they get to the finish line. It was a close one. Last couple cars going to cross the line. Dale Green in amongst them as well here. And yet again, we're seeing a lot of drivers in a nail biter right at the finish, but just nothing doing for that one. It does look like we had all but maybe about 4 cars finish on the lead lap, and Christian Braun going to be the last amongst those in the number 32. So as we see our winner take his celebratory victory lap, and his rivals come up alongside to give a nice congratulations. I do love the sportsmanship in this series. There's your winner, Ryan Cowley over Kellen Heimbecker, and James Martin is going to round out our podium. Top 3 split by only 1.2 seconds. Streltsov must have had a slowdown because I thought he was closer than that earlier, but he'll get a 4th place. Gerbino in P5 after leading the early stages of this race. J.R. Gregory was 6th, as Peter Sigourney was 7th, and then Mike Matson was in the 8th position. Andy Jenks 9th, and Kevin Orr rounding out your top 10. From there, it was John Gibson, followed by Mark Foley and David Glen, 11th, 12th, and 13th. Nathan Abuhaka, with some moves that impressed us up here in the booth, was 14th. Dean Chapman, P15, and Charlie Boyer, unfortunately, slipping down the order into 16th. Mark Rondeau in 17th, along with his own issues. Marcel Eunice, P18 for him. Charlie Farron, 19th, and Aaron Sunday wraps up your top 20 of this field. Then it's Chris Sherburne in 21st, Jeremy Hall P22, and Scott Bowers in 23rd. Kevin Schultz, good enough for 24th today, as Jonathan Reber will be in 25th. Then outside the quarter century mark, Dale Green is 26th. You've got Anthony James 27th and Devin Hopkins 28th. Steve Comas 29th, and Mehmet Karachai. Didn't get to see much of him. He wound up in 30th. Gary Rice was 31st. Christian Braun 32nd, as I said, last on the lead lap. Jason Barnett 33rd. Patrick Adamczyk 34th, and Nelson 35th. Casey on going to be our last driver to see the finish in 36th. Neville, Coomer, Jarawala, and James sadly going to wind up DNFs here today. Let's see if we've got any of our friends waiting to chat with us here. And I don't see any of our drivers at the ready yet, so we'll give it a little bit of time before we get going. But first 2 races, boy, I'd say they delivered. We have some crazy good battles in these first 2 events of the Watkins Glen rounds, Ron.
Oh, it has been an absolutely compelling start to the season. The action from Spa to get the season up and rolling for all 4 of the series, absolutely amazing. And here at Watkins Glen, I may be a little bit biased. I adore the Glen. It's the closest track to me. I think we discussed this on the other broadcast 2 weeks ago, but I love Watkins Glen. And that's a pretty darn good race. We had a mix of everything from great racing, heart pumping action, a couple of bits of chaos every now and then, but that strategy content keeping us on our toes as well. That was a mix of everything that we have in a race, and I absolutely adore it.
Looks like our winner's ready to join us now, Ryan Cowley. So let's talk to him about what it was like dealing with that pressure there at the end. Ryan, congratulations. I mean, we were impressed with how you dealt with that at the very end. You kind of inherited the lead after the pit stops were through. So where did that put you mentally in that second half of the race?
Well, I was playing the long game on this one, right? Because I didn't have a great race because a little over aggressive on the first one. So I kind of just sat back there, saw where I was fast, saw where I could gain a little bit of time, and kind of just picked my moves and slowly moved up the field and just, I was just racing the track, and just one car at a time was kind of my mentality.
You almost looked like you couldn't decide where you wanted to place the car on the run into the inner loop on the last lap. What was your plan to try and keep Heimbecker back as you came to that white flag?
Well, there's a little bit more drama going on than the broadcast there, because I kind of short fueled the car, and so we came out and I was showing about 7/10 of a lap short. So I was short shifting, saving as much as I could. I had about a 3.5 lap lead, so we were just trying to save, and so brought the gap back. And then Glen and I actually know each other. We race autocross together. His car says autocross is racing, so this is a really special win because it's my first PCA win, and autocross takes P1 and P2. Shout out to the Utah SCCA Autocross Club.
Well, big congratulations on that. Are you going to do anything special to celebrate your first win?
Yeah, I'm going to work tonight. I work graveyards.
Well, you can brag to all your coworkers and let them know that you're the big man on campus. Congratulations.
It's going to be a good night. Thanks, guys.
All right, Ryan Cowley with some work to do even after he's won the race. Up next, though, I believe Ron has caught up with his friend, Kellen Heimbecker.
And Kellen now joining us here in the broadcast booth. Kellen Heimbecker, thank you for joining us here in the broadcast booth. Pretty good race for you here today. How was it at Watkins Glen?
It was a really great race, and it seemed like traffic in front of me kept it together. Not a ton of incidents out there, at least as far as I could see, and I had a lot of fun. I raced with Ryan quite a bit, and it was fun chasing him.
And he brought up the fact that you and him have an autocross background. I gotta say, as someone who did autocross for 10 years with the SCCA of the Philly region, I can say autocross strong represent. But it looked like a pretty fun race towards the end. I want to ask you about the nerves as we got to the end of this race today.
Yeah, I've been in decent positions before and let the nerves get the better of me. Today, just over comms, I had a few people in my ear, were chit-chatting, was able to keep the nerves pretty calm. There's a couple little small incidents out there as far as the rear end starting to get away from me, and was able to shake those nerves off in about a half a lap and keep my head down, keep moving forward.
Yeah, worked out pretty well for you in this first race on this new version of Watkins Glen. How did you find it here today?
I don't have a ton of experience at Watkins Glen, so I started initially practicing on the old version. I wasn't able to get too used to it before the change, but I'll tell you, the bump in the bus stop is a doozy.
And very, very fitting that we were actually showing you all through the bus stop as you mentioned that. It looked like a rather uncomfortable ride. I'm sure the suspension certainly got a big test on your race car and pretty much every other race car all throughout this field. But looking ahead to the next round of the championship, Indianapolis in 2 weeks' time, what are your thoughts heading there?
Practice. Fortunately, I was able to spend a lot of time for this race. Today's actually my 15-year anniversary, and my wife's so supportive, letting me spend time doing this and practicing, and I hope that it's the same for the upcoming race.
Yeah, and looking forward to seeing you out there on the racetrack at Indianapolis, and congratulations on the anniversary, and congratulations as well on the P2 here today, Kellen, and we'll look forward to seeing you out there in Indy next time, Mats.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Well, that's when you've got a keeper. So let's chat to James Martin, who keeps himself a podium today, who is pretty close behind this right at the end. So I got to wonder, James, how much were you cheering for those two to start fighting?
Actually, to see them start fighting with about 4 laps to go was huge.
it really did bring you in a little bit. Unfortunately, it didn't quite get you one more spot. But how do you feel otherwise? Are you satisfied with the third?
You know what? I am. I'm coming off of 2 knee replacements, and I'm just getting back into racing for 60 minutes. And tonight was a really good night. A couple of bobbles early, cost me some places, but had good speed. Sat on the pole. It's a good night.
Well, glad that your recovery is going well. Is 60 minutes about the limit you're feeling like, or do you feel like you could keep going a little more tonight?
I could have tonight just on adrenaline. It's not the racing, it's the afterwards that's a little interesting. And of course, some people to thank as well.
Well, I mean, go ahead and thank those people, because we're glad that they helped you get back on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Princess Cruise Lines, of course, for sponsoring all of this. And Nikki Chan, Last 10th Racing, has been wonderful. I've had 9 or 10 lessons with him, and it's been great. And then also, Chad Henson, pro driver, got to race with him in the 70 for 70 and learned a lot just in those 2 weeks.
Well, thank you for getting back to racing, giving us a good show today, and best of luck in Indy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
James Martin with a successful run in spite of maybe some physical limitations here to a podium finish. As he mentioned, we will be back in a couple weeks' time here for the club class. We're going to be going to Indianapolis. That'll be October 2nd for that race. And then, of course, we'll be back with more Watkins Glen in just a couple days' time. Next Wednesday night, September 24th, the sport class will go racing here at the Glen. Big thanks to the steering committee at PCA Sim Racing, as well as to our team tonight here with Hugo and Ron. Until next time, though, race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.